Good morning. I'm Thubten Jigme, and Venerable Kadro just returned from her Singapore trip, and so she's jet lagged, of course, so she'll be back next week to resume teachings. So this morning I'll give a review on the practice of Tonglen. So we'll start with a little bit of meditation to calm our minds, let go of the past thoughts, any future thoughts, and just focus on the breath for a few minutes, and then I'll set a motivation. So we'll start with some prayers.
I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger.
For the motivation this morning, I've been thinking about all of the wonderful teachings we've been receiving on the methods for developing bodhicitta, which of course is necessary for attaining Buddhahood. And so we can rejoice that we have the path laid out so perfectly. And if we follow it, we will attain our aspirations. We're in the perfect situation, having a precious human life, having met the Dharma, to attain this highest goal. So with the goal of developing bodhicitta, let's look at the Tonglen practice today as another method to develop love, compassion, and bodhicitta. Then we will be equipped to attain our highest goal of Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. So for this talk, I took material from Volume 5 in Praise of Great Compassion, some writings by Alex Berzin, and from Transforming Adversity and Joy and Courage by Geshe Tekchok. So there are so many methods to develop, to realize bodhicitta, to develop love and compassion. And that's so brilliant because all of our minds are so different. So we can find the methods that really speak to our heart and then practice those. And so we'll have to do a little bit of experimenting and digging around to see what's going to be best from, our particular mind. And the combined method that Venerable Kadro presented demonstrates all of the components. And so I'll just list those just to get us back into the content a bit. So equanimity, then recognizing all sentient beings as our mother, remembering their kindness both when they were our mother and in other ways, and then wishing to repay their kindness, then equalizing self and others, and then the disadvantages of self-centeredness, the benefits of cherishing others, exchanging self and others, taking others' suffering with compassion, and giving your happiness to others with love, and the great resolve, and then bodhicitta. So, lots, lots. But that's so good because if we hit a wall or, we're stumped a bit, all we have to do is look for a practice that's going to open that up for us, and then we continue to progress. As Venerable Kadro said when she taught this, the Tonglen practice of giving and taking is a very advanced practice. So it's important to remember that. So we have to approach it in a way that it's going to be beneficial for ourselves and others. So it's part of the relative bodhicitta teachings, the wish based on the development of compassion to alleviate the suffering of all sentient beings and to attain awakening for the benefit of sentient beings. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about this genre of lojong. So Tonglen, it's a type of practice that comes from the genre called lojong in Tibetan. So lojong is usually translated as mind training. However, training the mind sounds as though we're training the intellect, but that's not what it's about at all. So the word lo is often translated as mind, but actually it means attitudes. And the word zhong has two meanings. One is to cleanse, purify out. We are purifying out our negative attitudes. It also has a connotation of, once we have done some purifying, of training, learning, and developing more positive attitudes. That's why some call it cleansing of attitudes. That seems more accurate, at least to me. So these teachings are about changing our attitudes towards self and others. And they come from 2 chapters of the Avatamsaka Sutra, or the Flower Garland Sutra. And then a little bit about the lineages that have kept these practices alive for us today. So the 2 great Indian masters who spread these teachings were Asanga and Nagarjuna. And they also had the lineages and teachings of these sutras. Eventually, these teachings came down after some centuries to the great master Shantideva. Then a few centuries later, at the time of Atisha, there were difficult times in India, and many of the more specific Mahayana teachings were no longer available. Atisha heard that the lineages and the teachings were available from a great master in Sumatra, so he traveled by sea from India to Sumatra. It was a very difficult journey, of course. And he observed the master there to assess his qualities, and being convinced that this was a true master then, he started studying with this great master, Dharmakirti, or he was more frequently referred to as Sir Lingpa. And Sir Lingpa held these lineages of Nagarjuna, Sangha, and Shantideva, and then Atisha brought them back to India. So it's helpful to understand why these lineages are talked about and it's kept. And I never understood that so well before. It was just, okay, names of old ones, okay, But think about the actions of the past masters who had authentic teachings and realizations and how they have been passed down to us. No matter how difficult it was, they went to get authentic teachings. This shows us the preciousness of the bodhicitta teachings and the teaching on changing our attitudes about self and others and cleansing these attitudes. How these great masters considered it so incredibly precious that they underwent so many hardships to actually get these teachings. So if we fast forward to nowadays, teachings are everywhere. We have so many of them. And it's really easy to kind of trivialize them, I'll pick on this a little and then that and then this and then this and then this. And so we have a lot of information very superficially of teachings. And we just kind of jump. It's kind of like shopping, jump. And it's not so helpful. We don't really then take them very seriously, and we don't really apply them so well to ourselves. And so it's interesting. For this reason, the texts were often written in a style that was very cryptic, with only a few words and really difficult to understand from just reading the text. You needed a teacher. And the great masters wrote the texts like that so that if we wanted to understand them in practice, we had to put in a tremendous amount of work and effort to get the explanation from them. And we certainly experienced that recently when we received the 7-point mind training teachings from Venerable Children. You read the text and it's like, okay, and then she unpacks it and it's like, oh, okay, such a different thing. This cryptic style also weeded out disciples who weren't so serious. And even when the texts were being taught, often the first time they are explained, they aren't explained very clearly. However, those who are really serious will ask for more and go deeper and put in all the work and effort. So that just reminds us that Dharma study is not just a matter of getting information. It has to be applied. And the example that I read about was, it was reported that Geshe Chekawa spent 6 years studying with Geshe Sha'awa, okay, to internalize and realize these very advanced teachings on cleansing our attitudes. Another account said it was 14 years, so a long time. And it was only after all of that that he wrote the text, the 7-point mind training, which then spread to all the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism. So even though it's advanced and difficult, with practice, and if we do it properly, it will cleanse our attitudes. And so there are people who learn about Tonglen and are fearful of taking on others' suffering and giving their happiness and resources away. So because of that, then that's one of the reasons why these teachings are so advanced, because if we do the practice and we just get fearful, it's not going to be helpful at all, yeah? So we need to do some preliminary practice if we really want this practice to cleanse our attitude of self-centeredness, and underneath that, our self-grasping. And Alex Berzin explains Tonglen in this way. What is needed to understand and excel in the Tonglen practice of giving and taking is an understanding of emptiness beforehand. This is a relative bodhicitta teaching, and the biggest obstacle to being willing to actually take on and experience the suffering of others and give them happiness, our own happiness, is fear, the fear of suffering. And fear of suffering, of course, is based on self-centeredness, grasping at an I who doesn't want to experience suffering, doesn't want to get involved. If we think in terms of a solid me, we think, what is going to happen to me? If we sincerely want to practice Tonglen, not just a simplified version of it, we need to prepare by having some level of understanding of the emptiness of self. Otherwise, we are just attacking our self-centeredness with very strong methods, strong visualizations that can be frightening, so not so helpful. So it's very important to realize that any suffering that we take on from others who do exist and who do suffer is suffering that they experience in the form of an appearance from their minds. It's the form of a mental hologram arising as the activity of the mind. And it's the same thing for us, in that if we were to take on and experience that suffering, that would also be an activity of the mind, a mental hologram. The me of anyone's experience of suffering is an imputation phenomenon on the basis of that suffering, and as an imputation phenomenon, it cannot exist and cannot be known separately from its basis. Therefore, the person experiencing the suffering is an inseparable part of the hologram that appears of the suffering. And so this is very important in terms of Tonglen practice. We have to discern and actually perceive with an exceptionally perceptive state of mind that this is the way that mental activity exists and functions. Otherwise, what happens is that we take on the suffering of others and then we hold on to it. But any moment of experiencing is just happening in that moment, and that's it. It's not something that we can find, hold on to, and then we think, oh no, now there's this suffering that has come inside me. Thinking that, we freak out, as if it's going to stay and sit there forever. It's not that the suffering has originated from you, truly arising from you, and now I have your suffering inside of me, and now the big me is experiencing your suffering. It's not like that. It's just the arising of an appearance. It's just experiencing, and it doesn't have truly established, findable existence. And yet it exists. So doing Tonglen, we can start with emptiness meditation, reminding ourselves how we exist, how the one who is suffering exists, reminding ourselves that these appearances are just like a dream, nothing solid, nothing fixed, nothing separately set up. Also, there are so many different explanations of how to actually do the Tonglen practice. And practice can be very extensively done or in a condensed way if time is limited. But I think finding one practice that resonates with your mind is the best plan, and to go very slowly at first and not take on so much. We want to, grab it and put everything on ourselves and then do it, and then it becomes an intellectual experience. And that's not what we're looking for. That's not what we're looking for. And so starting with emptiness allows us to actually go deep with this practice without getting fearful. Now, if you do that and you start doing it and you get fearful, then you need to back out and then study emptiness a little more. So the best way to start this is start very simple and then build from there. And so to do that, we have to be very connected to how we're experiencing what we are practicing. To be very in tune with our energy, with our body, what's going on inside. His Holiness says in Volume 5, in praise of great compassion, the taking and giving practice helps to further increase our love and compassion and our capacity to exchange self and others. Taking entails generating the compassionate wish, I will take all problems, sufferings, and confusion of other sentient beings on myself, so that others may be free from them. So again, just in what he writes to begin with, at first that's too much to take on. That's too big. So doing something littler is much more helpful. So it's kind of like when you start doing this practice, if your love and compassion is not open and your heart is with this, then you've lost kind of the purpose of it. It becomes intellectual. So you really have to stay centered with love and compassion. He also says, giving is motivated by love. I will give my body, possessions, and virtuous qualities and their causes to others so that they may be peaceful and happy. Through this, we generate a very courageous and resolute mind that will make our bodhicitta effective. So any comments or thoughts on what has been talked about so far? It's a lot. If I need to go over some of that again, let me know. Mudeki?
I just want to emphasize of how important this practice has been in helping to build courage. Yeah, that's, I think, a huge asset and beauty of this practice is that it really takes a lot of self-courage to really look at that suffering of my own and others and to, face it and work with it.
Can you describe a little bit about how that does increase your courage?
I think first really feeling it and being with it and not doing my normal way of running away or suppressing or judging or anything, but just, I mean, that's a huge act of courage right there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, good, yeah. Yeah.
Much appreciate the thought, which I don't have, is to do a preemptive meditation on emptiness. Sometimes I work myself into it. I want to do the Tonglen practice, but I'm pretty self-concerned at times, self-preoccupied, and I'm hoping that the Tonglen helps me with that, and it does at some level, but to go into the practice, dealing with that self-concern and that self-obsession first, loosening up my sense of self and then diving into this looks like the transition would be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Because I kind of use it sometimes to kind of fix myself rather than really doing what I want to do is to cultivate these deep mental states. I just want to put a Band-Aid on something that I can't address right now, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, good point, yeah. Selden?
I think before I could think about taking, other suffering on, kind of had to build my own self-confidence up, because by, I've talked about this before, but about just watching my critical mind and just seeing how, as I'm less critical of others, I'm less critical of myself, and that gives me the self-confidence to build upon and to get to the, the higher trainings.
Yeah. I think another piece of this when we start is whatever we pick that we want to focus on, we have to be very careful and clear that it's not going to bring personal distress. So when it does that, it's so overwhelming, it's so heartbreaking, it's so too much that we're not doing Tonglen then. It's a practice all about me, which is kind of what you said a little bit, but even much bigger, yeah. So we have to really be careful about that. And if we're not in the place where we can set that down, then it's not the time to do this practice, yeah, I think. Rashika?
So when you mentioned contemplating about emptiness, is that so we can understand how suffering truly exists, so one won't, because most of the time I don't fear, like I actually would like to take on the actual suffering of others, but I feel like maybe there's some type of fallacy in that, me not understanding. So when you're talking about needing to understand emptiness, is that so we don't generate that fear, that thought that we're going to actually take on their physical suffering? Or is that so we understand how suffering truly exists from our side and their side? Or does that make sense? Why are we really focusing on emptiness?
Yeah, as long as you don't say that it truly exists, the suffering, it's not truly existent. That's kind of the point. So, yeah, it's kind of a getting ourselves in line with reality. So everything is like an illusion. And yet when I start this practice, sometimes I'm holding so tight. That's not going to work. I have to loosen that so that I can get my mind in a place where I can actually do it and stay with it with my heart. Yeah.
Sometimes I actually get tied to the fact that I really want to take
Yeah.
the person's suffering, not realizing that it's Sorry, I think sometimes I can actually get tied up in the desire to want to take away the actual suffering of that person, but like you said, it's illusory, it's a mental factor. Am I getting that right? So I can't actually, okay.
Yeah, well, and we can't take on somebody else's suffering. It's theirs. Yeah, so then that brings us to what is kind of the purpose of this. So we use this whole circumstance so we can destroy our self-centeredness, and underneath that, our self-grasping. That's really the purpose of this practice. But we have to get ourselves in a good place so that we can entertain what we're working with in a way that has more reality to it and not so, emotional, not so tightly held, so graspy at it. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
I've been working with this a lot. I've been working with this a lot.
There you go.
Okay, I've been working with this a lot, and I'm finding that I'm having to pick kind of neutral objects of suffering because if it's someone close to me, I'm too caught up in it.
Yeah.
And if I'm trying to take on the suffering of someone who's a problem for me, I'm very snarky about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of picking a
Yeah.
news story that I'm not attached to
Yes,
and
perfect.
trying that.
Yeah. And like Becky said, the more you do that, then your courage increases and your clarity about what you're doing increases, and you can take on more. Yeah. And pretty soon take on the whole world's suffering, Yeah. Good point. Yeah. Venerable Seppo.
One thing we didn't include in this review, which would have been a step from looking at the disadvantages, or even before, the disadvantages of self-centeredness and the advantages of cherishing others, is that beautiful 9-point meditation on, I guess, equanimity, equalizing ourselves with others. And that's where I have found it very helpful to think about emptiness in equalizing myself with others. Because if I really think about how I exist, this constant flow of body and mind, very impersonal, that's hard to get some real understanding of. But I imagine that if one could really get that there's just this constantly changing body in this, at least, in this life, and then this constantly changing mind that goes from life to life, and understand that in that impersonal way, it's just whatever we're focusing on and whatever karma we're creating, and that's creating the next moment of that flow. Then thinking about that in terms of all other sentient beings, there is an equality there that's very different than just thinking about, I want happiness, you want happiness. It takes it to another level. And then, of course, it seems like it would be easier to want to take on someone's suffering because you've created so much space.
Yes, yeah, very well said, yeah. Yeah. I think the other thing about this practice is for quite a while it needs to be done when you have some space in the mind, space to do it, doing it quick doesn't get you what you're looking for. That's kind of true for all the practices, if we're doing something kind of by rote, especially after we learn the methods quite well, and then it's pretty easy to just go into it, but we're kind of not there. That's kind of the problem that we need to keep track of all the time. And so if that happens to me, I start again. And if I don't have time, then I drop it and find a different time to do it, so that I'm not practicing something that I'm already really good at, which is doing it by rote and not even there with it, kind of. Especially the longer we practice, that becomes a very difficult habit to recognize and get out of. It's so much easier just to do that, And of course, that's why they ask us to say something 3 times. Hopefully one time will actually be connected to whatever it is. Sometimes not. Just saying. Yeah. Okay, I thought what we would do is, if there's no more questions or comments, I thought what we would do is I'll lead us through a practice. And we're going to do this slow. So get into your meditative posture. If you're in a chair, back straight, feet on the floor. Bring your attention inward. Observe your breath. Relax your body and mind. And so now bring to mind one person that you want to practice with. And don't pick somebody that you're very close to, very attached to, very angry with. More like Lisa said, something that is a little more neutral, but is suffering. And so we'll start with emptiness meditation, where we remind ourselves how we exist. So there is no solid me that is experiencing this suffering from the other person. It is an appearance from the mind. The person exists like a dream, impermanent, changing moment to moment, even though it seems like they are fixed and solid, separate, set up from their own side. That is not accurate. So now think about that person, get them into your mind's eye, and remember that they do not exist as they appear, and neither do we. There is nothing we can hold on to. Any moment of experiencing is just happening in that moment, and that's it. It's not that this suffering has originated from truly arising inherent. Other, and now the truly existing suffering is in you, and you are experiencing it. It's just the arising of an appearance. It's just experiencing, and it doesn't have a truly established, findable existence. And at this point, you can use any other thoughts about emptiness that you use that are helpful for your mind to get clear about this reality. And so now, imagine the person in front of you and think about the dukkha or suffering they experience. Now, this is a crucial point here in terms of what we think about the dukkha that they are having. It needs to activate our compassion. We want to feel our heart open with compassion, not personal distress. So feel compassionate for this person and what they are experiencing. And then think this compassionate wish. I will take on their suffering so they will be free of it. And now we use our imagination and imagine that their dukkha is leaving them, this person in front of you, either in the form of dark clouds, smoke, or pollution. Pick one, and then entering you as you inhale. Then come back to and think how wonderful then that this being feels so different because their dukkha has left them. Now we use what this sentient being doesn't want, their suffering, afflictions, and we use it to destroy what we don't want, our self-centered attitude and self-grasping ignorance. So that this dukkha that you inhaled in now is at your heart. It's a dark lump. And it's the embodiment of your own self-centered attitude and self-grasping ignorance. As the cloud, smoke, or pollution enters you, it transforms into a lightning that strikes this lump, shattering it so it no longer exists. It's gone. Now feel the freedom and great spaciousness at your heart. now that the self-centered attitude and self-grasping ignorance has been forever destroyed. So spend some time with that. Now, as you feel the freedom and great spaciousness at your heart, look at the person in front of you and see that this person is liberated from their suffering and its causes. Now their heart is open. Now remembering that everything arises dependently and is like an illusion, nothing fixed and solid, nothing separate from ourselves. Now that our heart is open, now that their heart is open, we can train in generosity. So then you give from that clear, open space at your heart. At the heart chakra, at the center of your chest, appears a beautiful light, the embodiment of your love. Now feel that love arising in you. You're not feeling much, and you need to go back to remember their particular suffering and how you would like to remove that suffering. And then you open your heart to all of that. Then feel the love arising in you. This wish to give them what they need so that they can find peace, clarity, happiness. Now this person in front of you, imagine giving them all they need to find temporal happiness while they are in samsara. Get specific with what you will give them. They have those things now. Now again, focus on the person in front of you. And see that because they have received material and mental help, that they are balanced and calm, have some clarity, have some ease. And now give them all the conditions they need to attain the ultimate bliss of Buddhahood. Now bring the person again in front of you in focus. And now see that they have entered the path. They are practicing and studying well. And then remind yourself of why that is possible. Because there is nothing inherently existent, nothing permanent. And so not only do things change, but we can direct that change. By following the path. We see how they have more skillful means, more wisdom, more love, more compassion, that they're happier, more content. And we know because we have a connection with them, we will meet them again in future lives. And they will help us, we will help them, until we reach our final goal of full awakening. So, what was that like for people? Were there places that were more difficult? Were there questions that came up? Any comments that you have? And Lodeki?
I think one part that I still struggle with is when I'm bringing in the smoke, imagining breathing in, I either hold my breath or then I get confused on breathing out. It's hard combining the breath.
Yeah, we don't do that for a really long time. Yeah, that's much too difficult. Yeah, so don't do that. After you have this so clear in your mind that you can do it on the fly, walking even, then you can start thinking about putting it to the breath, but not for years, not for years. Yeah. So let go of that part. Yeah. Venerable Thubten?
What I was reminded of doing this practice again this morning is that even though I simply cannot remove this person's suffering in that kind of situation, what it does do, it changes my orientation to that person.
Yeah.
So that when we do connect emails or anything, I'm in a much more balanced place. And that's a very helpful place to be.
Yeah, it's so powerful. Yeah. And of course, the ripple effect of that helps everybody else we come into contact with, because we're in a different place. We have more love and compassion kind of arising. Venerable Rinchen?
A question that came up for me now that I don't think I've really thought of before is, if we choose someone who's also a Dharma practitioner, like for instance, say we were thinking of, the suffering that Venerable Children has, on her long flight to Europe or whatever. She can probably handle that better than I can. And so when I'm like, oh, I'll take that suffering, it's like, she probably can handle it. So I guess, should we just avoid thinking of people where we think that they're better Dharma practitioners than us?
Well, I don't know. Maybe other people have some thoughts. You have some thoughts. Yep.
Some Somewhere in the teachings or in a book on this practice, I've encountered the advice that we don't do this for our teachers, this practice. Okay.
I think that's missing the point. The point is not, I'm going to take away the pain of sitting on that plane, because our teacher definitely has that. It's, she does. It is, can you cultivate compassion for the very real physical experience of this person? The meditation that I was doing this winter that Lama Zopa Rinpoche wrote from, oh gosh, it'd be good if I could pull it up. He does have you take on not the suffering so much of your teachers, but of recognizing the challenges that they have taken on, recognizing the commitment that they have made, and taking that on as, may I be able to take whatever obstacles they have, may I be able to take whatever, challenges they may have, and being able to fill their bodhisattva. But so it's not reducing our teachers to the same sort of mundane level, which is not so good for our mind necessarily. But to acknowledge that our teachers have tremendous work that they've taken on, and so being able to take that on is also an act of cultivating our own compassion.
Yes. Yeah.
That was
And
interesting.
courage.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is what we need. Yeah. Yeah. Way back. Here we go.
So I had a couple of questions earlier when you were speaking, thoughts like, how do you take on someone's suffering? Does that mean you are suffering too? And the practice reminded me of my understanding of Ho'oponopono, a Hawaiian practice, where, as the previous Venerable was saying, in order to feel compassion or understanding, so for example, if I was looking at someone's suffering or someone's file and understanding that that suffering also exists within me too, and then to do a purification practice. In the Ho'oponopono, they say, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And so I guess those were thoughts in my mind of not necessarily feeling like I had to suffer this tremendous suffering as well, but recognizing that those elements exist within me too, and then somehow through purification or something it can disappear. But I'm not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And so instead of kind of purification, I guess we do the thing of imagine the lightning bolt cutting our, blasting away our self-centeredness and our self-grasping, and then have our love and compassion open and grow. So, and, this practice is such that we get to learn how to approach it with a balanced mind so that I don't get overwhelmed, or so that I don't get kind of dead about it, or I don't get fearful, so that I can do this exchange in a way that, and for me anyhow, all of it has to do with how that I imagine it in my mind. If I imagine it being beneficial to the other, then that is what I'm focused on. If I imagine that I blasted away from me and now I have more love and compassion, then that's beneficial for me. If I imagine that they have the things that they want and need so that they can function better, that brings me joy and that helps them. So all along all the points, to keep the mind in a balanced place, this is something that is just helpful. And mostly to us, because it is working directly at our self-centeredness and our self-grasping, which is what we need to get rid of so that we can progress and become Buddha. Does that answer your question?
I think so. I guess that relationship of taking on their suffering, so it's not, like you said, becoming overwhelmed with the suffering of the world or with that particular person's suffering, which oftentimes can happen where we quickly want that person to stop suffering, and then we feel all of those things, but then we ourselves are suffering, so it doesn't seem very helpful.
Yeah, so that's that personal distress thing. So all of a sudden that the practice then becomes my pain, my difficulty. That's the personal distress. And so we've lost the focus of what this practice is about. And that is that can be very common. So we have to be very clear about what we're picking to focus on. So it's not going to be something big and huge at first at all. It might be like when the last time you were in the grocery store and the person that checked out your groceries had a thing on their wrist because they've doing it for so many years and their wrist is it's wearing out. So something like that. So you can relate to it, but it's not full of attachment and, and so big from your own side, that you identify with it so much that it becomes such a huge, overwhelming emotional thing. Yeah. And the beauty of this practice is we get really clear after a while of what we can tolerate and what we can't. And so we don't criticize ourselves or judge ourselves. It's like, okay, I can do this, but I can't do that yet, and that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. So it's a slow process. Yeah.
Read this little section in the sadhana so that it's really clear what I was saying. So Rinpoche says, take the various kinds of sufferings, the various kinds of hindrances onto the self-cherishing mind. Hindrances to the long lives of gurus and holy beings, hindrances to their efforts becoming successful, hindrances to the teaching spreading in the minds of sentient beings, hindrances to the development of the teachings such as those that impede the progress of particular dharma centers and so forth, right? Visualize that, it absorbs into the self-cherishing mind, smashes this, and this becomes the cause of the gurus living long until samsara ends, of their efforts becoming successful, of the teaching spreading in the minds of sentient beings, and of the perfect development of the teachings. Yeah. So it's a different level of taking and giving, maybe in a way, but it does acknowledge that there are such hindrances to be absorbed by our self-centeredness.
And I think too, when we do that in relation to our own teacher that we have a close connection with, then we start relating in a way of, this is how they do and what they take on. How can I grow my mind, my vast mind, so that I can step up and do the same? And so then we go on that track, which is very helpful, because that's needed for us to become Buddhas. We have to have a very vast mind to hold everything. And we see in our teachers, they have that. Yeah. So it's possible. So that's just all positive. It's all good. Yeah. Yeah.
I think where I am with this practice too is just the starting point of taking on my own future suffering that I'm often not in touch with, because I don't think I'm gonna age. I'm not aging, right? It's like, and I'm not gonna die. And there's like a tremendous amount of ignorance there. But that really helps me to deal with my irritation that comes up, say, when people I'm attached to have the same suffering. Like my dad won't go see a hearing specialist, right? And I'm like, why not? It's like, yeah, you have that too, right? Instead of getting so irritated, so I can think, okay, there's that suffering of the fundamental, this is like ignorance of conventionalities, right?
Yeah.
That stops you from getting in touch with
Yeah.
actually, your suffering and what you can do about it.
Yeah.
And then it helps me get in touch too with where President Trump is.
Yes.
Because as much as I dislike his ideas, I think he probably has a hard time getting out of bed in the morning.
Yep.
Just the usual aches and pains of being old. And it's like, wow, he has that. Let's get in touch with that instead of my usual,
Yeah.
I don't need to go there.
Yeah.
So that practice has helped, in this
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I want to make one more comment about the taking on the hindrances of teachers. I find that I haven't done it very frequently in my practice, but when I'm resisting the training of my teacher, when it's my own stubbornness, my own self-centeredness, my own, bullheadedness, that whatever hindrances may be arising for their ability to be able to share and train and fulfill their aspirations, I use that to blast the part of me that gets in the way of my own ability to receive the gift and the training and their preciousness, because I think stubbornness and resistance are a huge obstacle to being able to recognize their purpose in the world. And being as close as we are to our teachers, I think sometimes we forget how vast that aspiration really does impact the world. And so here I am 3 feet away from them, and I'm just kind of pushing back on it, so it really does help my self-centeredness regarding my own stubborn resistance to the training and to receiving their advice.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And we can see how these practices become so personal. It really is a heart practice. It's my practice. It's your practice. Yeah. So we have to be, or we get to be transparent and honest and, and then use it in this good way. Yeah.
This time, I just want to emphasize doing the real basics, because I got totally stuck. I picked someone that I thought would be easy to do, and as I started to look at it, I thought, at this moment, I don't really hold that person dear. I think I do, but when I actually started to get into the meditation, it's like, whoa, this is a little wall. I have to start right here, and let's go back to some basic love before I can get anywhere with the rest of this practice. So it's, it requires us to do the preliminaries. And if we haven't gotten there, we can't get there, then we have to go back and do them again. Over and over.
Again, why this is an advanced practice. And so if you don't know from your own side how to generate love and compassion and feel that in your body, start there. Use some kind of visualization in your mind. I say this one a lot because this is the one I use. If I'm stuck with having trouble getting some love and compassion, all I do is imagine 18 baby puppies coming and jumping all over me, licking me, loving me, and now my heart's open. I feel it. My heart is open. I know what they smell like. I know that they have unconditional love. They're so soft. It's really good. So like that. Then I go from there. Okay, heart open. Now how about this person? How about this person? Yeah. So I transfer it to the next thing, and that works. It always works. Yeah. We can imagine something and we experience it. Mind is the source. Yeah.
It helps me when thinking about this with someone I find difficult or that pushes my buttons, to think that if they were happy, they might not be, speaking in what I consider harsh speech or whatever, to think that, they're suffering. I mean, even if it's just seeing, impermanent things as permanent, we all have that. in common,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, and not get caught up in the story like, well, they did this to me, and then round and round and round. It's like, you think you're at a certain, I think I'm at a certain place, and there it goes again, you know, but, you know, just to break it down to a common, you know, level is helpful for me.
Yeah, so they're suffering like I am, they can transform like I can, yeah. So, there we go.
So I've been doing this working with trying to come to grips with my relationship with my parents and break past things. And one thing I was taught was to imagine them as small children. Not as my parents who raised me, but to picture them as small children, because I can feel compassionate, and now like I want to imagine them as puppies. I love that. But it really has helped, because it doesn't work with my brothers, who I knew as children. That has failed. But I'm the eldest, but it does work with my parents. If I can kind of bring them back to 5-year-old, 4-year-old children, I can hold a lot of compassion, and I can do some of this work, where when I visualize them as adults, it is just so blocked.
Yeah, so you have to keep doing it a lot, and it will change. Yeah, of course, yeah. Okay. So let me just read one last thing from His Holiness, and then we'll stop for today. He says, although we cannot, in fact, take the sufferings of others and give them our happiness, imagining that it is possible strengthens our courage, love, and compassion. It also eliminates any hesitation or reluctance to help others when we have the opportunity, and propels us toward full awakening, where we will have all the faculties necessary to be of the greatest service. That's pretty good. Yeah, so let's do that. Okay, thank you.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.